All right. So I had a chance to look at the document earlier this afternoon. So thank you all for posting in there. Saw a lot of good stuff in there. So today the plan is we're gonna start with the chant, and then we'll do just a brief check-in from everybody, how you're doing. I want to hear you talk about your writing experience. What I saw in the document, and I don't know if it was like one person like riffing off the next or what, but mostly everybody told me what they wrote on, but not about the experience itself. So I'm curious to hear about that as well, of course. Then we'll go into some dyads. We'll do a little bit of seeing if we can get to the bottom of some of this perspective in the Hindu knowledge stream, the perspective on death and dying. And again, that's not because I think you need to know that. It's not because I think it's the most important or the most correct or anything like that. It's that one, that's where I started from, is from the yoga world. And two, I think it's cool for us to have a very different perspective to become familiar with. And as we are familiar with other perspectives, that helps us to build what I call that inner structure. And I'll just repeat thinking about that perspective. It's slightly different, but I started the first night of training for, I think I told you I developed a therapy training for my sister's work, the Forest School. She does, she did forest school educating and founded the first forest school in the United States. And then when I took it over, when she died, I recently developed training for those teachers to be able to do like more therapeutic interventions and to work with kids with greater needs. And so last night in our first course, when I was trying our first session, I was sort of orienting them to my perspective in therapy. The first thing I said was that the first thing you have to do is to figure out a way to know as many different people with as many different lives, expressions of lives, backgrounds, as you possibly can, and to have, to whatever way is realistic for you, like creating real community with people who are very, very different than you. And the more that we do that, the more our minds expand and our hearts expand. And so I would say, even within that, just understanding a little bit about what the thought processes are in different kinds of spiritual or religious backgrounds or different cultures will be helpful to us building that inner structure. So we'll do a little bit on that, and then we'll spend the rest of our time diving into what are we doing. So we got our inner structure, and we aren't attached to all these identities, but like, is that what I'm just gonna walk in and do? Like, I don't know. So maybe I'll actually start with like I don't know if it's a joke specifically, but something funny to me. I used to always think when I would go and do outreach programs that I would say that I am the Wanda Sykes of yoga. And I'll tell you why I said that. Because to me, I just want to offer people a fully open heart, a fully non-judgmental presence with some skills behind it. But if I were to, for example, go to the VA and pitch and call up to their volunteer coordinator and be like, hi, I'm Molly, and I would just like to offer you an experience of radical love and inclusion, like nobody would hire me. So I have to say, I would like to teach a yoga class, but I secretly know that what I want to teach is something different. So anyway, many, many years ago, when the internet was new, somebody sent me this audio recording of Wanda Sykes. I didn't know who Wanda Sykes was at the time, and I didn't realize on the internet that you could have things that weren't real, right? So it's this recording that I'm assuming is this real woman, but it's not, well, I mean, Wanda Sykes is a real woman, but that the thing was real. And I don't know if you all have ever heard it, but it's called consensual, what's that called? Consensual visit. What's that word? Wait, it's not that. Conjugal visit. It's called conjugal visit. And she calls a prison and she's like, hello, I would like to do a conjugal visit. And the person is like, great, who did you want to do that with? And she was like, oh, just anyone. Just thought I'd put a smile on someone's face. And then it goes on from there and gets really raunchy. And to me, it was like the original hilarious thing from the internet. Now it's very old. But anyway, sometimes I feel like that's really my work, right? Like, oh, just, whoever, but I have to name what I'm doing. So I think the more that we open up our minds and we open up our perspectives, the more that we have that sense of just like, whatever. But at the same time, that's not really realistic, right? Like, no one's going to hire us to be their end of life care companion if you're like, I don't know, just thought I'd come in and make it feel okay somehow, right? Like, we have to have real things that we're doing. So that's what we'll be spending some of our time on today and the next several sessions. The next all of the sessions, really.
I just want to chime in that is that okay?
Yeah.
That I feel like the more one becomes an expert in whatever it is they're doing, the less parameters they put around it, the more comfortable they get with it, more they're like, or whatever you think is good. I mean, we get so much less strict with what we're giving, the more we feel confident about what we're giving, I think.
I agree with you 100%. And the more I think we also just have life experience, right?
Mhm.
I actually got a really good compliment up at the guild from some young people who I was getting really frustrated with. And then I was like, they're probably just really young. And so then I ended up asking them, how old are you? Okay, they're in their late 20s, early 30s. And I was like, oh my God, I could be your mom, whatever. And then they were like, well, how old are you? And I said, well, now you guess, because they wanted me to guess their age. And the compliment that I got is she said, I'm going to put 50 at the lower limit because although you have a youthful vibe, you walk around the world as if you know who you are. And that was like from a younger woman. And it just like, it really made my heart sing. I was like, oh, okay. Right. So I think you're right, Dina. And I think that that's something we can leverage. And I think, especially as women, and I think, especially when we are doing work that falls more into, like, let's say, like a spiritual realm, that age becomes a virtue rather than in so many other settings where aging, and particularly for women, becomes like less than, less than, less than.
Mhm.
And that we have less need to like push ourselves or like demand respect or tell you
Mhm.
what you need to do because we know a little bit about the world, right?
Yeah.
A little bit about the way the world works. So thank you for sharing that. Absolutely. Anything else before I chant? Okay, so here comes a new one for you, a new chant. And then right after that, I'm just going to ask for a check-in. I saw you a week ago. So just, you don't have to check in, but it's an opportunity for you to say what's going on for you, what's coming up for you around death and dying and end of life care. Or like I said, sometimes there's just something in the back of your mind that's like getting, taking up space that you want to share. So any of that's open. So this is a short one that will fit into our talk on the perspective of death and dying in the yoga knowledge stream or in the Hindu knowledge stream. It doesn't have a name. It's just asatoma. So it's short, so I'll sing it 3 times. You're welcome to close your eyes. You're welcome to shut the screen off. You're welcome to lean back in your chair, whatever feels good. Om asatoma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotir gamaya mrityorma amritam gamaya. Om asatoma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotir gamaya mrityorma amritam gamaya. Om asatoma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotir gamaya mrityorma amritam gamaya. And that loosely means Lead me from untruth to truth, from darkness to light, and from death to immortality. Untruth to truth, darkness to light, death to immortality. So even just before the check-in, let's just play with this for a moment. Untruth to truth. What do you think, based on maybe some of you know this from your yoga practice, maybe it's from clicking on some of the links I sent you, or maybe it's just like an intuitive sense. What is the truth? What is the untruth that I'm being led away from, and the truth that I'm being led to? So lead me from untruth to truth. It's the untruth. Yeah, Naomi.
Maybe the untruth is our attachment to the world, our identities, those sorts of things.
Exactly. Something along those lines, that the idea of that if there's a word that we'll come back to later in the kleshas, avidya, which is lack of knowledge, they'll say, or ignorance. And what their ignorance they're saying is that you don't recognize that you are more than just this incarnation. So if we go to that Atma Shatakam and what you said, Naomi, that attachment to these identities, the truth is in this is that my identity is really this through line, what I came from, what's animating me now, and what I will go to, and that my suffering comes from my attachment to this untruth about me as this material being, and my importance as a material being, and my identity, and like you said, the things I have, that's what matters. And what this is saying is, no, actually, the truth is that you've always been a part of the divine. And in fact, there is he's dead now, but a Benedictine priest named Bede Griffiths, who's an English priest. I think he's from England. Definitely has that accent. And later became Swami Dayananda. He moved over to India, and he founded the first Hindu interreligious ashram in India. He never converted. He stayed a Christian, but he was deeply, deeply interested in Hinduism. He wrote lots, but one of the books he wrote was called, I believe, Cosmic Revelation, The Hindu Way to God. And if you're really into yoga, I would highly recommend that book. What's interesting, why I'm bringing this up right now, is one of the things he liked about the Hindu perspective. He said in the Christian perspective, when they talk about, or in the Catholic perspective, when they talk about this original sin, it's that you were born as a sinner, right? And that your life is about cleansing yourself of those sins and being acceptable to God to enter into heaven. And Bede Griffith says, I think we got it wrong. I think the Hindus have it right. And he says, I think the original sin is that we don't remember our divinity. That's the sin, not that we're not divine. Right? So it's a process of uncovering and remembering that for ourselves. So that's the untruth to truth. So then he says, lead me from darkness to light. What do you suppose that is referring to? And they're obviously riffing off each other. Lead me from untruth to truth, darkness to light.
Hey,
Okay.
I think maybe like ignorance or attachment to worldly things and the body and pleasures, to light being like enlightenment or nirvana.
Right. Absolutely. And as I'm asking the question, I'm thinking it's really a way of repeating the first thing, right? That I'm in that like darkness of ignorance and thinking that this is the whole thing. You lead me to the light of knowing, as in enlightenment. One of the important things, especially in that yoga perspective, that especially yoga people tend to miss, is that it is the idea that this is all part of God. So I've often heard like younger yoga teachers and saying things like, yoga is really about focusing on the positive and, seeing what's light and seeing, and like, no, actually, that's completely not what yoga is about at all. It is absolutely facing and recognizing that to be alive means there's a lot of darkness and a lot of light. And that's all of what it is to be alive. And that's like the Buddhists, right? When they say life is suffering, and people think, oh God, those Buddhists, like they're such a downer. No, they're actually telling the honest truth that life is filled with suffering. So what do we do with that? And then the last one is lead me from death to immortality. What could that mean in this context then? These are ancient chants. Lead me from death to immortality. And they're kind of going in order, right? Take me out of this ignorance, bring me to truth, get me out of this darkness, show me the light, give me immortality. Because what? I've thought a lot, Vanessa, about your statement that you've made that energy can never be destroyed. I've actually used that a couple of times since you said that, just that exact way. So I think,
I feel like it's just saying like realizing that this isn't the end of everything.
exactly, because it can't be. Right, that this incarnation can go away and that can be like a death, but I can't actually die. Yeah. So that's that. Asatoma, Sadgamaya, Tamasoma, Jyotirgamaya, Mrityorma, Amritam Gamaya. It's the whole chant. All right, so now it's time to hear from you. Anybody have anything they want to share, something that's come up, or even something that's not related to this course that has come up that's kind of in your mind, or anything at all before we dive in?
I'll just share that it's funny, I'm not always a big sharer, but in this class I seem to be.
Love it.
The Ram Dass poem, and then I just clicked on the link and I listened to his like 50-minute speech, and I felt like in the back of my head I'd heard it before like years ago, but I just loved it and I sent it to a couple people, and yeah, I thought it was just so great.
That's awesome. I'm so glad that you had that experience. I love him so much. Almost everything he says, I'm on board with. And when he says things that are like I'm not totally into, then I'm just like, whatever. It's like a function of his time or where he was. And I mean, he wouldn't be for everybody, right? But
I love just like how sure he is about reincarnation and just, like he's such an authority, but I'll believe it. Like they say, I like to believe these things. So
yeah, and isn't it curious, right? That people will say things with such great certainty.
yeah.
But like even Ram Dass is Ram Dass, like he knows he doesn't know. And then he's like, it's gonna be this, you're gonna be a pod and a soul pod. And yeah. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Dina. Anything else?
I'll share something. I don't know. It's not particularly uplifting, but it's something that I'm struggling with a lot. In the sense of I'm here in DC at a conference for corporate directors, and last night there was a dinner for LB. I can never get the acronym right, even though I'm part of that acronym. And anyway, you know what I mean. So
Yes.
so we're sitting around in small like tables, and we're having a conversation, and the whole topic of people getting taken away through ICE, and and uh just the tragedy of it, and the kids that are being left parentless, and just the suffering, all the suffering. And then it dawned on, and then you have all these people around this table who are directors, and have more than enough resources financially and everything. And they start going one by one. Well, I have my escape route. I just bought a house in Costa Rica, and this other one's like, well, I'm gonna go do this. I'm gonna move to this place, and like, and then I said, as people are talking, I said, you know, I wonder if the Nazis intellectuals were all sitting around the table before Hitler really made his, when he was just starting, right? When these things are starting to happen. And I wonder if people, these people who had the resources to get out and to save themselves, I wonder if they were having similar conversations at a table at some point. And then, I said that, and then somebody said, yeah, they said, actually, we now understand maybe why the citizens of Germany didn't do anything. Like, it was like how we all said, oh, how could this happen? How could this have happened in Germany? And then, like, now we're dealing with it because what we've resorted, it's like, oh, well, I'm just gonna go save myself. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's just like, I get it. That's human nature, but like, it's, uh, it was very like frustrating for me that we couldn't. First of all, we just focused on ourselves. That was the first thing that was frustrating. And but then it was like the like we can't think, like we can't come up with something to help, and it's a tough problem. I'm not saying there's an answer, but it was more like, okay, so we're gonna just let this happen, and we're just gonna let it happen. Oh, well, it's not my issue because I'm gonna move to Canada, or I'm gonna move to Costa Rica, or I'm gonna get out of here. And it's like, well, what about all the people that can't like get out of here? So anyway, that was a conversation at about 9 o'clock last night, which, I walked back to the hotel, and it's just kind of like, I don't know. Doesn't feel good. I mean, and then and then I think this, like, okay, so I'm not supposed to be attached to that. Like I'm struggling with, oh, let that go. Like that's like not, like I shouldn't let that impact me because I'm like allowing that my own suffering, like in a way, I don't know. Does it make sense? I'm not sure it makes sense, but
It makes total sense. And my brain has like all of these different things that I'm thinking. Is it okay if I like give some reflections?
Mhm.
Like, so one is whenever I'm in Seattle in general, because I am an ex-Seattleite and I love Seattle, I'm also,
I'm not in Seattle.
oh,
I'm in DC right now, just
no, but I mean, you're from Seattle, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I was just going to start like being from Seattle. When I go to Seattle already, I always feel that. And I'm like, this place is such a shithole. And you're worried about like, oh, what are we going to do about like, you're going to step over those people on Third Avenue instead of like, we have so much money and so much creativity. It's like the brain trust is there. And so is the bank trust. And nobody wants to do anything. And I feel like my head is going to explode. So that's just one in general. And then two, down here in Mexico, honestly, that's partially why I wanted to come to the States, because I like wanted to be in it. I wanted to feel it and see it, because so many of the people I know down here are just, I'm sorry, but that's my mood. They're just like vacuous, spiritual bypass. They're like, la, 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 la. That's why I left the States. Like when George Floyd, what's his name, Chauvin was finally convicted, I held this like, meeting for people to talk about that, and so many people were like, why are you even bringing that here, Molly? Like that's in the States, that's why we left there. And I'm like, it's very, very hard for me. And then also I just from being up there too and talking to one of the women on my retreat, and she was saying, yeah, like we're all just still going to work and kids are going to school, and meanwhile it's a fascist totalitarian takeover of the United States. And until they're actually coming for us, we go on like business as usual. And then where's the us? And then finally, Richard Rohr talks about this phrase that I love. He calls it the edge of the inside. And that his views are so radical that many people in the church really don't like him, and especially like evangelicals and fundamentalists. And they'll say, well, why don't you just leave the church then? Like, if you hate it so much, then just leave it. And he's like, well, I don't hate it. I actually love it. And I live and exist and teach on the edge of the inside because I am still in the in group. And if I were just to leave, that means everybody that has a platform and privilege to actually complain or fight back, we just give up. And now it's left to everybody who has no capacity. And then it becomes that thing. And I have felt that even since the first Trump election, when I heard, I mean, I moved down here way before any of this. I wouldn't like leave because of this, because of that very reason. Like that idea that, well, we'll all just leave. So that what? So that what? Like, yeah, so I'm with you, Vanessa, and I think it's really hard to, yeah, I think it's very hard to just keep going on and acting and business as usual and sitting at a mucky muck dinner with the, LGBTQ folks at probably a fancy restaurant and deep, like whatever, right? And we're just gonna have this conversation about this. And it's just, yeah, I can imagine having a fitful night of sleep after that, or maybe an extra cocktail, I don't know.
But also just really trying to tie this work to that. It's a level of suffering. Thinking
Yeah.
about this thing, they don't make, I mean, it doesn't make me happy to
Right.
think about what's going on. Like, and so how it's, and I'm sure it's impacting a lot of people. I mean, I think some people, the only way they can deal with it is to act like it isn't an issue because
Mhm.
they don't know how else to deal with it. But I don't know how that all comes into this work. And I was just thinking about it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Something is dying right now in this country. Something is dying.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good way of putting it. And how do we steward that?
Mm.
Yeah, now you've really got me thinking, because talking in these terms, like it's already in hospice. Like it's not coming back. It's not revitalizable. Like maybe it could be reincarnated, but it is dying and it's not coming back. I agree with you. And so what do we do about that? Yeah. It's making me think of this thing too, that is in Hinduism and is also in Buddhism, which are called they're called the four attitudes, paramhitas. Paramhitas, I'm getting the word wrong, but it's these four attitudes to cultivate. And they're again, they're both in Buddhism and Hinduism. Buddhism comes from Hinduism. And they say that it's cultivating the ability to be happy for people who, I'm going to use like really low level words here, but happy for people who are happy, compassionate for people who are suffering, like excited and admiring of the meritorious, and neutral towards the wicked. And the neutral towards the wicked part, again, those are English words on Sanskrit words or on Pali words, so they're never going to be precise, but that idea that we would be neutral. And that is, I think, or I know, the most difficult one for all of my students and me to like unpack and say like, well, how would I possibly be neutral towards the wicked? Like, what would that even mean? And what I believe it's referencing, or I hope it's referencing, is the idea that when I come at some evil from a really like steady, grounded place, like again, like many of the civil rights activists, they were nonviolent, but they were not pushovers, that's for sure, right? And I mean, they were badasses. They were coming from this like real strength, inner strength that has us facing and confronting evil in a different kind of way. So for me, I think like I can totally be that person that's like something comes across my feed. It's not even related to me. And I'm just like, like and then I can let the devolve, the whole conversation devolve. And then I'm like, well, it's just because you're a fucking idiot, you're a fucking racist. And like, that's like where we end. Like, and what I can know is that that person on the other side is either a bot or they're laughing at me. But it is most definitely not pushing the needle in any direction. However, when we come with clarity and presence and we push back, I can't always say what the outcome is going to be, especially right now as we're living it, but it's going to be a different outcome. It's going to be a different kind of power to push back against evil. And I have to believe that that's what that attitude that is being suggested, is that the neutrality towards the wicked is not that we're just like, la, 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 I'm neutral, I don't care. It's this inner sort of neutrality so that I can really face and then be sustainable in this, what's going to be a very long, I mean, it's going to be the next 2 years and maybe the next 4 years, but the impact will be the rest of our lifetime.
Yeah.
And that's horrifying. Yeah. Naomi. And I'm glad you bring these things up, Vanessa. Don't ever stop. Please don't ever stop, and don't ever, you don't have to, you can if you want to, but you don't have to warn us. Like, just say it. It's what we're breathing. It's what we're living. Naomi, yes.
Yeah, it's a great conversation. And even though I'm not in America, we certainly hear and all around the world what's going on. And I'm one of those people who checks out. I become overwhelmed by the news and my feeling of inability to do anything or change anything. But having said that, I also try, and I don't know if this is just a bit woo-woo or airy-fairy, but I really do believe in that ripple effect of our energy. So my kids and I were having a discussion recently, and they were kind of going, oh, there's nothing we can do and everything's fucked. And their attitude is like, so what's the point in even trying, I tried to kind of say, but I do actually believe that even though we're just a little person, if we focus on what we're bringing in our interactions with the next person, then that will influence the next person, and that will influence the next person and the next person. And hopefully that will have some kind of a ripple effect ongoing. I guess that's my way of keeping some sanity around that stuff, that I have some kind of a power in it, even though I don't have any power in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, and you're right, sometimes I would bristle at those kinds of things for sure, Naomi, but the way you prefaced it and getting to know you a little bit, I also totally understand that. And also you're in another good country. Like, so like, what would I do? So I totally get that. And I also hear that you're saying like, just holding hands and singing Kumbaya is not going to actually do anything, but really intentional interactions with other people might. And what I also take from that is that the more intentional interactions you have with other people, when you actually have to use your voice for something, or when you have to actually really stand up, you have now shown yourself as a person who is measured and who is thoughtful. And then therefore, maybe someone that people should listen to, versus when I can be like, you could probably imagine, you know me a little bit by now, like I can be a real hothead. And I would imagine that then coming from that place, it would also be very easy to dismiss me if you wanted to, right? Well, that's just her flying off the handle again, right? So I really do see what you're saying. I also listened to a podcast the other day in my friend's car, and I was just searching for it. The woman's name is Adrienne Maree Brown. Are you familiar with this person, anyone? Yeah, okay, Carrie does. Adrienne Maree Brown. And I don't remember the name of the podcast. It was like How to Survive This World or something like that, or
It's How to Survive the End of the World.
How to Survive the End of the World. And the one that I was listening to, I don't know if it was the most recent one, but I'll find it for you. It was some people were talking about what does it mean to take risks and what are you willing to put on the line, and that we all have different capacities for risk taking, and also it depends on like your age and your medical ability, and like, can you get arrested, like would that work, do you have another parent at home that can, if you've got small children, like really just talking about the reality of risk taking, and then reminding us that there are risks that we can all take, and not to lose that as part of our power too, and that we have to search inside ourselves and say what is actually a real risk, and I actually can do this. So instead of just sitting out. Yeah, and so I was even thinking up at this contemplative retreat center, there was like a couple of white men that were there at all of the meals, and they weren't on my retreat. And sometimes someone's talking about like body image stuff, and I said, well, that's just fucked white supremacy stuff or like whatever. And then those two men never spoke to me again the entire time I was there. Like, oh. And so I was saying to my friend on the way home, as we were listening to that, I was like, now I'm not going to act like that was some giant risk I took, because that's just how I am and how I was raised. And yet I had now spent the next of the week, the rest of that week, feeling relatively uncomfortable around these men that just like didn't want to talk to me, and I didn't care. But at the same time, I'm saying, like, for some of us, maybe that's just the risk. Maybe that's what we can do, is even finding those times where like, I'm just going to speak this thing that is going to make me not be, win the homecoming queen prize or whatever. And I don't care. So I really feel what you're saying, Naomi, and I really get it. And then I would also, again, you're not in the United States, you're very far away. But it is happening. Like what happens in the United States happens to the whole world. We do know that. And that when and if it gets that far and has those impacts over there, yeah, just keep for all of us thinking, what is the real risk that I can take, instead of I can't do anything. Like there actually is something. Let me just figure out what that is. I do see I think any of us who watches the news, what we do see is racism specifically being emboldened around the world, in all other countries, because they're looking at the States and going, well, that's what they do there. I keep secretly wishing I was like in a situation where somebody was yelling at someone and telling them to speak English or whatever it was. Like, I want to be there. I want to be in the middle of that so I can fight back. Anyway. Yeah. Thanks for bringing this up, Naomi. Thanks for your share too. It was really vulnerable, and it's just it's a scary time. And I do, like I said, the very first time we came on screen, like I was like, write to me if any of you, like, this is going to be hard for you, because I can't not say it, but I can certainly find ways to be a professional and make you feel comfortable in this course. But I think we can't not talk about this right now. It would be ludicrous to just be like, oh, we're just on this class. Like, if it just really doesn't come up for whatever, fine. It's not like we have to like find a way to bring it up. But to me, it would be ludicrous to not have this be part of our conversation. It's what we're going through collectively. And a lot of people have already been hurt, and a lot more are going to be. I'm terrified for that October 18th No Kings rally. Like, just please be careful. To me, there's just no way that it can be safe.
Yeah.
It's gonna be purposely fueled for violence, not on the left side. It's on the right.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And after
So
this,
then he can say, see how violent they are, and then he can justify more things.
absolutely.
But there's going to be so many people in every place that's out. They can't be everywhere. at once. And that's what we
But
said.
there can be mass shooters anywhere, just unhinged people anywhere. And now that with the Charlie Kirk thing, I feel like it really has opened up that, that for a reaction. That's more my fear, is not specifically just like the tussle between the left and the right or whatever. It's the unhinged people coming out with their AK-47s.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
terrifying.
Or driving their SUVs onto a sidewalk. Carrie, you were gonna say something. Oh, I'm sorry, Vanessa.
I just, you said, you said happy for the happy. I know I got neutral toward the wicked. What were the two middle ones again?
And these are terrible words I'm using for them. I teach a whole course on this. So, but okay, so these are the words. We're happy for people who are happy. And then we talk about like, oh, of course we would do that. And then we think like all the times we're not happy when people are happy. Compassionate towards the suffering. So that's the same thing. We're like, of course we'd be compassionate towards suffering. And yet, this one's harder to translate into English, like, I guess like happy for the virtuous or the meritorious.
Okay.
And then the last one is neutrality towards the wicked. They're
Okay.
really good. They're really good to go deep into. Carrie, did you have something you wanted to say?
Sorry, I'm on my phone. I'm out at a yurt at the Oregon coast right now with my dog on a little solo retreat, but it's already happening in Portland with the ICE protests. A person who was peacefully protesting got snatched by the cops yesterday and taken across state lines to a jail in Washington state. And she was just playing in like a quirky Portland marching band called like the Unprecedented, great name, band. And she was charged with violence towards a federal officer, but the eyewitnesses that were there said that the officer shoved her first, and then she's like a local person who's like a mental health therapist and a mom of a toddler, and like she's well known in the community that one of my friends is in, the therapy community, and she's not a criminal or an illegal immigrant, or she's just like a person protesting, and they did that. So we're all calling the U.S. Attorney's Office to get her released, but it's just voicemails, whatever we can do. But that's just really it makes my hair stand on end, and it's becoming more frightening.
Absolutely. When all those dudes are in plain clothes with no identification and their faces covered, like they're already dangerous, even if they are federal agents.
And
But
coming after
how could we
women
possibly
who
know
are
that
out
they
there.
are?
Yeah.
They could be anyone, right?
Yep.
Like taking advantage of this moment. It is, yeah. It's terrifying. Yeah. Well, I can at least say if you need a break, you can come down here and visit me to refuel. To get a break.
Escape to Mexico.
Exactly, escape to Mexico, where the anti-American sentiment is growing, for sure.
My husband is Mexican.
Ah,
So
yeah.
we were thinking about getting dual citizenship.
See,
But
that's
not to escape, but we still want to help people out, but just especially for him. So I don't want him to get iced,
oh.
Well, yeah, and I would say if you're thinking about it, and then I suppose we should move from this, but I don't know how long they'll keep it that way. Like I'm going for Mexican citizenship because that was always the plan, but I don't know how long they'll keep it that you could also keep your US passport, right? Like the way that this is all looking right now would totally be like, what? You want a passport from Mexico? Then stay there, right? Like, okay. Yeah. And actually, this was the first time when I flew out of the States actually, I forgot about this because it was so early in the morning. They checked my residency card for Mexico and questioned me a lot about going there. And I was like, I have never, ever had to show my residency card or questioned leaving the United States, of which I'm a fully passported citizen. So, yeah. All right. Well, there's that. This makes just death and dying seem like an easy conversation.
Oh no, I think the more I think about it, it's like a lot of death and literally death and also death of a ideals of a country, of something to aspire to, and the
totally.
death of our rights as citizens. And it does impact the world. I mean, we were the some I mean, no, by no means perfect. To think about slavery and all the other bad things in this country, what they did to the Native Americans. I mean, it's not like perfect, but we were an ideal, a something to
Absolutely.
strive for. And now we're not anymore.
No, yeah, and I agree. And that also makes me think just in general of when I say that you can do grief work without doing end of life care work, but you can't do end of life care work without doing grief work, right? That part of part of what we can continue to, excuse me, talk about here is also how do we meet people's grief around these like larger, more systemic deaths that you're talking about too, Vanessa. So there's the grief about people, you know, losing their family or their grandma or their neighbor or what have you. But there's also this grief of like what is happening, and that this country that I was born in and that I was raised in is no more and never will be. And with my kid who suicided, like I think so much, especially about that age group, like 17 to 20, like it's just it's despairing. Like why bother? I mean, this is what they're looking at. This is what they're looking at as the adults in their future. So I think we need to really like if you have kids or you got kids in your life at that age, like we got to really keep our eyes on them too. Yeah. So yeah, let's keep bringing that up, especially too when we talk about tending to grief. And I suppose what I could say, I'm just thinking this right now without practicing it. I think I've told you that when I teach the course, The Holy State of Grief, I always say the first thing I want to tell you and write this down is you cannot stop someone's suffering. You can't stop their suffering. So stop trying, stop saying the thing, just be with them. And so I'm just sort of like grokking on how that's true too in this larger grief and death and suffering. And that when we meet with a friend or a colleague or a neighbor who is experiencing this grief at a more acute level than we are, or at least in the moment, that maybe that's also what we could remember, just like as a quick and dirty, is like you can't stop it by saying, well, it's going to get better, or maybe this will change, or like whatever, like that we can just really practice just being with a person who is despairing without trying to cheer them up, because you can't cheer them up. It's already happening. Yeah. All right. Thank you for bringing that up. When do you get to come home from the other Washington?
Wednesday. Tomorrow. I'll get in about 8 o'clock tomorrow night.
Let's be
Get to
happy.
see that little nugget sitting on the
I know. Look at that. And your dog too.
Yeah. That's a Wanda Sykes thing.
Exactly. I love her. All right, my friends. All right. Do we feel good about switching gears? Okay, no? All right. So what I want to have a chance for is to hear about your writing assignment. Sorry, I've got something sticky in my throat. I want to hear about your writing assignment. And like I said, I saw what you wrote about, what you wrote about. And so I'm curious about like what the process was like for you. So when people have shared these before, some people just read theirs out loud. That's fine. Some people just talk about what the process was. oftentimes people show us their thing that they wrote about. Sometimes people didn't like it. So you never with me have to like pretend that you enjoyed something that I offered to you or asked you to do. So, but I would be curious from each of you about like, what was that process like for you? Second follow-up question that I'll bring back around is if I only ask you to do very few like assignment-y type things, and I think there's actually like 2, and that was one of them. Why would I have asked you to do that in an end of life care course? So those are some things that you can think about as you share with me, share with all of us your experience. And do you want me to call on you, or will you just raise your hand? All right, I'm calling on you. Dina, it's going to go Dina and then Tracy and then Vanessa and Carrie. Dina, Tracy, Vanessa, Carrie.
Cool. Yes. So I
Oh, wait, where's Deborah?
just did it.
I only got to, yeah, I thought you could only remember 4 so far.
I'm good.
They'll come after.
She's-
Naomi and Deb will come after. I didn't forget about them.
I just did it, and I gotta say, going into it, I was like, why are we doing this? But then I totally got why we're doing this, like immediately when I started doing it. And I took a piece of because I just did it before class. I didn't write it in yet. I took a piece of ground cover, I pulled it out of the ground. And then I was like amazed that like we are nature, and like the piece of nature has all the components of a person. And I'll just write, strong foundation, artistic, regeneration, propagation, babies, moms, fertilizers, substantial roots, messy, broken at parts, so resilient, varied, vulnerable, indisputably beautiful, subjectively symmetrical and asymmetrical, demanding. You need soil, water, sun. And I just thought, oh, this is like a microcosm of a person who lives and dies.
Awesome.
Yeah, I don't know.
Let me see your ground cover again.
Yeah, I just picked it off pulled it off the ground, but then it was so weird because it's got such a strong like stem,
Yeah,
but then there's roots. I don't know if you could see, but there's roots that are coming down that are like super like fat that make it stay in the ground. But when you pull it out, it has like a stem. It's really cool.
wonder what it is. You should do like a plant snap or whatever that is called.
Yeah, I mean, it's right in front of my apartment, so I could just ask.
All right. So make sure you do the actual assignment too, that 20 minutes.
I did that. That was 20 minutes.
Oh, I thought you said you hadn't written about it. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, I wrote it in my journal, but I didn't write it in our.
Oh, in the document. Okay.
I
So
did it. Yeah, that was it.
now it's all making sense to me.
Okay.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks, Dina. Yeah, it's a beautiful piece of nature. Yeah. All right. Who did I say next? Tracy. See, that's why I couldn't say all 6.
That's okay. I remembered.
Good.
Yeah, it actually I had a nice experience because the shamanic group that I'm a part of that morning, we had been talking about ecology and how we interact with nature and how nature interacts with us. So I don't recall the exact conversation now because that was like a few days ago. But anyway, I pulled some of that into my experience. I went to a public park, and I really like mesquite trees. And so I picked up a mesquite pod, and I found out later because I met with my shamanic group again. I went into this whole like nurturing thing and how these pods, just all the potential, you can make I was thinking of the indigenous people here use them a lot for making flour and how we use them today. And what I was thinking of was as more of I guess you'd call it a spice, a flavoring, mesquite flavored. But I did I did take the 20 minutes to experiment. I didn't smell it though, because it was a public park and it was probably covered with dog pee or something. But I did everything else. I did all the other touchy-feely stuff. Um, but anyway, it was really it was just I don't know if I said, I found out later when I got back together with my shamanic group and we were kind of talking, and I found out it was during a Cancer moon, which is all about that nurturing. I just had this experience of how nurturing. I mean, even if it just winds up in compost, that's so nurturing, that's giving. So yeah, it was a very interesting experience. Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. Yeah. I don't know. Am I answering your question? I'm not sure if
Sure.
I am. Okay.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it's pretty open. Just what was the experience like for you? Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I know what I was gonna say. Not during, I did take the whole 20 minutes. But later, I mean, I think it was a day or two later, I was kind of curious and I wasn't aware that mesquite is still, the pods are still being used to make like a coffee alternative. I found all these food sources that are being used that I wasn't aware of, that I can't remember now except for the coffee one, unfortunately. But yeah, so it was a really nice experience. I enjoyed it.
Awesome. Wow. Thank you. Thank you for that. Is the coffee called Capomo? Do
I
you know?
don't remember now. Yeah.
It's curious because they have something like that here and I don't know if it's from mesquite trees, but awesome. Thank you. Okay, Vanessa and then Carrie and then Naomi and Deb.
Okay, so I did mine last minute and I went out in front of the hotel and I like picked a little flower,
Mhm.
which I think is an azalea. I had to look that up. Uh and so I just I mean I can okay, so the thing in with that, well, we were supposed to write, there's two different things. Like we did the 20-minute writing, which I did, but then we're supposed to go into the document and talk about our experience writing it, or is it just the same thing?
It's exactly the same thing.
Oh, okay, okay. So I'll read.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I'll just read, which is, oh, I laughed at myself after reading the beginning of this, and so five, like fuchsia colored petals overlapping each other, and from the center there's six rods emitting and one rod is much taller than the others. The two petals on the bottom act as an anchor to the three petals above, like a pedestal. I wonder if that's where the word came from. The center petal is 90 degrees above the base petal and has deep fuchsia colors. It almost looks like two eyes looking at you, with the rods starting out like a nose. The rods pull you in, inviting you to touch them. The petals are an overlapping container for the rods. The creases in the petals are so calming, as are the colors. The ribbon and oval shapes invite touch, so beautiful, and the color provides energy and inspiration, like a deep breath. The shadows from the light are like another picture on the petals. The green endings of the flower, where the stem was, is like an umbrella cradling the work of art. Perfection, harmony, and yet so temporary, here for its purpose and then gone.
Wow.
So I'm very analytical. So I was laughing at myself like, oh gosh, I'm naming that number and how many and like the shape. And then it just started, and it, it started to get deeper in terms of the beauty of it, the experience of it, how it made me feel. And then just like life, like, and us, I think, us as human
Right.
beings.
Yeah, and I really appreciated following your, like, getting to know you a little bit in general is amazing. But following your analytical and that side of you, and how it's like that had to run its process a little bit and then continues to open up. That was really cool. Thank you. Carrie. Yeah, it's okay. I like really being able to
Sorry,
see your
not
there.
used to doing this on my phone.
It stinks. So thank you for doing it.
I kept pushing the button and like something else would happen. I kind of did the same thing. Like I started out the assignment, like approaching it like a serious assignment, like a reporter, like I'm going to describe every physical attribute of this item, which I picked like this beautiful branch from a tree with like autumn leaves changing color, like lots of pretty orange and yellow. And I just love looking at the fall colors and this season and everything. So I just like described it in a very analytical way and like, you know, every attribute of it. And then I started talking about my emotional feelings towards it. Like when you hold it up to the light, you can see through it and it's so beautiful and transparent. And I love the fall leaves. There's something, you know, they're ephemeral and they're about the changing season and this time of year, like the thinning of the veil. And that seems like extra poignant to me. And especially like, you know, ruminating on death and dying and taking this class and everything going on in the world. And just like another year and, you know, being just like going forward and everything getting composted and then it's going to come back around again. And so that's kind of my theme, I guess. And I like the idea of just sitting down to focus on something and not being distracted by all the crap that I'm distracted by these days, and how I used to just write in my journal before there were phones and all this bullshit. And I would have a more, you know, contemplative writing practice about maybe the most mundane thing, but it's like inner life, you know, and like it's really good for me. And so I can be really ADHD. And
You have your item right there with you?
no, I didn't bring it. It's at home. I took a picture of it, but I'm at the yurt in Nehalem Bay State Park at the Oregon coast, so I forgot to bring my item.
But tell me again what the item was.
I picked a branch off a tree with like the fall leaves changing colors, like some pretty, I don't know what kind of tree it was, a deciduous tree, of course, and with the leaves were kind of almond shaped and long and thin.
Awesome, beautiful. Naomi and Deb.
I only did this morning, and I happen to have. I've recently purchased for myself a set of cards, affirmation cards, and an Australian woman has put these cards together and put meaning onto wildflowers and then associates it with an affirmation. And so I pulled one of the cards this morning and I pulled a grevillea, an Australian plant called a grevillea. And I knew where I could go and get a grevillea from. So this is my grevillea. This is the grevillea.
Wow, beautiful.
There's lots of different varieties of this plant. And it's like it was like a scrappy kind of a tree about 2 meters tall. So I'll just read what I wrote, basically. So I was thinking about what I was going to write as I was walking back from where I picked it from. So I was kind of mulling over it as I was walking, not sitting stationary.
Cool.
And one more thing, the affirmation that was associated with it on the card is, I take time to sit quietly and listen to my intuition. That's the affirmation that happened to be with it.
Wow.
Which seems appropriate.
Yeah, exactly.
Dancing grevillea, reaching for light, golden and green, twisting in flight. Yellow-tipped anthers, spiky long leaves, straggly but graceful, you blow in the breeze. No perfume held by you, but food do you hold, a nectar for children from this land very old. Thousands upon thousands of years have gone by, with the first peoples of our country already aware of the power in nature and the power to share. A meaning bestowed on you by a modern young girl reaches to these depths of the power you hold. Our intuitive senses, our smells and our sight. Dance for me, flower, bend for me, sway, but you too, my dear one, will have the end of your days. Your moisture will dry, your colour will fade. You will wilt back to the earth and there you will stay.
Wow. Just a little thing I wrote, just a little thing I did. That's beautiful, Naomi. Thank you. Wow. There's a lot, besides just that it was very cool, there's a lot of richness in there. So I'm looking forward to reading back my notes before we take a break.
I actually thank you for setting the exercise because I actually love doing it. Yeah.
I've done this exercise so many times and it never gets old. So, and I'll talk about that in a moment as well. All right, Deb.
Okay, hang 1 second because I'm gonna get it.
Okay. We get to see what it is. And it's not Lula. Oh, and there's a doggy. Carrie's showing us her doggy.
I love dogs.
Me too.
It's a rose from
Oh,
a rose bush in the backyard
yeah.
in this little vase,
Uh-huh. It's
Which-
beautiful. I love roses.
which well, I'll read what I wrote in here, but so it's I planted it in the backyard and it's called Free Spirit is the name of the rose. It's one of my favorites, and it's a orange, red, yellow. It smells so nice. After my mom passed away, I planted it to represent her. And so right away it actually started blooming and grew, and so what I do is not always that rose, but I'll get a Free Spirit at the local flower shop too, and I keep it beside my bed. I try to keep one there every week and change it out, but it doesn't always work. But most weeks I do. And some of the things that I wrote about it is, the colors, it's about 3 feet tall. Which I read, it is my favorite type of rose. And I felt like my mom is telling me like she's okay and that she's happy and out of pain and living. And so that made me really happy. So then I feel close to her and I can look out my back door and I can see the rose bush always there. And if I'm standing, I feel like she talks to me and that life's gonna be okay. And that she watches over all of us. And then I just feel her presence. I wrote a bunch more in my 20 minutes, but it was more about that and what I feel from all that, from that rose.
So beautiful. So beautiful. Thank you. So the very first thing I want to say, going backwards in my notes, and then we'll take a break. One is just what you just described, Deb, of keeping that rose by your bedside and trying to have a new one every week. I just wrote down that is a contemplative act. right? So that when we were like, what are your practices? Like that is one of your practices. And we don't always see it that way. We might be doing that. We don't, think of it that way. But to me, as a person who like contemplative practices is really important to, I would say that that's a perfect example of one. Like I do this thing, I do it repeatedly. It has meaning to me. I make sure that it's fresh. You probably don't have like dead ones and smelly water next to you and all of that. So just wanted to acknowledge that. So I'm just going to read through a few notes that I wrote about the exercise, about your all response to the exercise. So the first thing I would say is like, why would I have you do this? One is it's a process of slowing down and looking deeply at something that you think either is not like, doesn't merit that much of your time, or that you might just have passed by another time. Or sometimes people choose something that's very like plain, right? Like it's just a rock, or it's just I put plain in quotation marks because that's totally subjective, right? But they're not putting something that someone like immediately, like that we are conditioned to say, that's beautiful, right? We're conditioned to see like a flower that's beautiful, but we're not necessarily conditioned to see a regular old rock and be like, that's beautiful too. So the fact that we can take that time and put that kind of attention towards something and slow way down, to me, is a perfect metaphor or foundation for this work. That we can go very, very slow and spacious, and in that slow spaciousness, we're catching things, we're seeing details that are needed. We're seeing details on people's faces. We're seeing things about people's breathing patterns change. Like we're in this space where we have taught ourselves to be slow enough to actually see what's around us, even when I think I already know what's going on there. And then from your reflection, starting from the very beginning, just like we are nature. And I think I maybe said this last time, working with Erin's group, which is all nature-based people, like we're always talking about this idea how we are kind of, again, conditioned that nature is out there and then there's us. But we are nature. We're exactly the same. Like we look different and we grow differently, but so does all the other plants and animals, right? And we are one of those. As a matter of fact, somebody, was it Carrie maybe, said everything is composted. I'm going to send you a little tiny video of one of my sister's students right after she died. And she gave me something that she told me, maybe you could compost this with teacher Erin, and how many people might have found that like, I don't know, somehow jarring, but that it would have just made Erin's heart sing, right? Because that's what happens. We compost and we are, that's what the body, the incarnation does. So that we are nature. I think about that idea of where attention goes, energy flows. So when I actually put my attention on something, those things then become much more complex, often much more beautiful to me than it had been before, simply because I didn't put my attention on it. And I have found often with this practice that people now want that thing and they're like, I'm going to dry that flower and keep it in my journal. I'm going to keep that piece of lichen on my altar. I'm going to take that piece of mesquite and I'm going to put it in my little, witchy bag with me. So suddenly these things become very meaningful when 20 minutes ago, they were just something sitting on the ground that you could have walked right by. And so I think about that with our work too, right? Like we're just meeting people and we are falling in love with them because they're in front of us, right? And because we have our attention on them. And that we see that they're complex. And so even when they're the things that are difficult, that's okay. We can hold that complexity as well. Also just what we notice in general, like what are the things that we call forward and what are the things that are like the last things that we notice, and then recognizing like, is it our process of what we noticed that this thing came first, like thinking of Vanessa's, like, what she called like the analytical things came first, and then after a while, the more sort of like poetic sort of things came, right? Does that mean that one is more important than the other? Or if we just have time with something, can we see all of those different aspects because we take enough time to notice it? Or we take enough time. That's why I said I loved watching sort of Vanessa's process that she shared with us through that, right? That it's that thing of I see something in one way because that's how I am. I'm an analytical mind, but when I stay with it, even my analytical mind has to see something else, especially if I've got a timer going and the assignment was, you don't get to finish until it's 20 minutes. So if we then translate that to human beings and we slow way down, whatever that thing we see at the frontmost, if we give it time, we know that we're going to see like the poetry behind it. This idea about where did something come from? We had a couple of those, and then I think maybe it was from maybe Naomi's also. Yes, it was Naomi's about where these things also came from, like ancestrally. So where did it come from in general? Like with Dina's, like what is this thing? Like what is this ground cover? Like I actually really want to know. But then so where did it come from? But also where did it come from over many centuries and lineages? And that when we look at another human being and we are tasked with supporting them at this very intimate part of their lives, that's something that we want to hold or find out or listen for, or just even be open to the curiosity, even if you never get to ask the question. Like that we know that this person came from a whole lot of things that preceded us, and that their ancestry and their lineage came from a whole lot of things that preceded them. And yet that's all connected into the person that we're looking at right now, right? So the sense of larger wholeness in all the directions. Yeah, so I think it was back to that same thing, how we open up over time. When we give more time to somebody, we see more. And then like Carrie was saying the same thing, like I'm describing these physical attributes, and then recognizing that the physical attributes always go deeper too, right? So we might say the physical attributes, and then we have that more depth about things that are not physical, but it's also that we have more depth about the things that are physical too, right? And then we recognize that that is also part of what makes up a human being. And my friend who I was just visiting with told me that he just the day before had sat on an 1.5-hour Zoom call for one of our friends who died over in England, and they thought that the death was possibly suspicious. He overdosed. And so my friend had to be, as his power of attorney, like on this magistrate call where they were closing the case about what had happened to our friend. And my friend was saying, I had to listen as the judge is reading this stuff off, like how much did his brain weigh? How much did his spleen weigh, right? And he was saying it was so like disconcerting, but part of what we were able to talk about also for him to integrate, it was probably kind of an awful experience, is that, but that's just truth too, right? That the physical attributes of a person are also part of their whole truth, right? So that made me think very much of that as well, that even the physical attributes are deeper, deeper, deeper. And then finally, yeah, just the larger metaphor in general, that as people who say that we want to do this kind of work, that this is what we want to, this is one of the things that we want to get good at, is just constantly like both like opening our sphere of what we're looking at, and then exactly simultaneously like zooming in and zooming out, right? Like we're also zooming really in and seeing like what is going on for this person right now, like what's happening right now. And that we learn to love the totality of it, and that we know that there are many things that we will never see. And we want to remember that, especially if we're thinking well, anybody, but I'm thinking especially with old people and our tendency in our culture to infantilize them and then like reduce them. And instead to recognize, like, why would I ever infantilize an elder? Because in fact, like they've seen so much more, and they've experienced so much more. And so allowing ourselves to know that, and we'll talk about this even later in a very dry way when we talk about systems theory, that whatever I'm seeing in this person is never the whole of this person. And so I can keep my mind really open to know that there is a much greater whole that I'm never going to know, but that I know exists, that I know it's there, and that I don't necessarily have to know what it is to still be able to honor the totality. And then finally, I don't know that any of this came up, maybe in Naomi's beautiful writing. But the other piece I just wanted to bring forward as well is that sometimes we make associations of things that they're only an association for us. And then we end up treating someone differently based on an association that's really about us and not about them. So on the one hand, we do want to like be able to see those associations about where the person came from or what all they might have been. But also we could look at someone and be like, well, that person reminds me exactly of my mom who I didn't get along with. Or, oh, this person is like my, an elder in my church that, and he reminds me of that, and he was a really, really closed version of this fundamentalist religion I came from, or whatever it might be, that's something we also just want to be like aware of, that possibility of how we project things onto other people because they trigger something in us that is an association for us. Like, I knew someone who looked like that. I knew someone who talked like that. I knew someone from that same town that you were from, or whatever it would be. And we can inadvertently then create a story about that person that's not really real. So there's that other side of that. Thank you all for doing it. And I'm glad that you enjoyed it, those of you who did. And I definitely encourage you to do it again and again and again. With that, we're going to take a break. We'll take a 10-minute break. So just put your timer on because it's some weird hour that I can't do the math for. I mean, I probably could, but it would take one of our minutes. So I'll see you in 10 minutes.
I watched that show when I was young.
They had it over there. Well, welcome back, Potter. All right. So we're gonna have a change of plans because I want to get you out of like heady things for a minute. So I'm gonna put you into dyads. And in your dyad, you are just, it really doesn't matter whose vignette, whose stage you set. Either one of you will start. And like I said, that's like as if you're a playwright and you're just setting the scene. And then what I want you to do with your partner is just to like brainstorm what could I do? So I walk in, I'm hired, or a friend invites me in for whatever reason, I'm invited into this space. What would I do? Like, what are some of the things that I could do? So I want you to not censor yourself. Just like make lists, come up with stuff. You can imagine it's the first time you've ever seen that person, which might be, you might be saying like, oh, I'd be getting to know them, or whatever. Or you can imagine this is the umpteenth time you've been with that person. So you can imagine whichever you want. I want you to just, go without censoring yourself. You also don't have to like get deep in the weeds. So if you said, for example, I could play music for them, you wouldn't have to then like think about like, well, what music would you play, right? So you can just kind of come up with things. And then the other piece to remember is that we're always going to assume in these that you already have consent, conversation, and knowledge of this person. So for example, you say, I could give them some essential oil But I'd have to make sure that the essential oil was okay with them, that it wasn't, you know, sensitive to their skin or whatever. We can assume that's already a given. So again, I want you just to think of all the possible things you could do. Doesn't mean that you will do them all. So later we'll come at this in a different way, which I'll talk about at the end, and it will be about making up duffel bags. But what I want you to think of right now, which is something I'll say then too, is that if you called like a plumber to your house, she's going to have all of the possible tools. And then she's going to see what the problem is in your house. And then she's only going to use those tools, right? So she can have an entire toolbox, an entire range of things that she can do. That doesn't mean that the plumber is doing that at every single place they go to or at your house, right? So that's why I want you just keep generating ideas, and don't worry if, well, maybe I would do that and maybe I wouldn't, right? Because it's just something that you could do, you might do. Sound clear what I'm asking you to do? So you're going to be in a dyad. One of you is going to tell your thing. You're going to start generating ideas. You run out of the ideas. The other person reads their thing and you see if you come up with more. Okay. I'm going to give you 15 minutes. I'll tell you when it's 10 minutes has gone up, and then when you have 3 minutes, and then when I hit the thing that says close the rooms, then you'll have just a minute to finish up. Okay. Here we go. We're going to spin the... I always feel like Vanna White spinning the, I was going to say spinning the bottle. That's not it. Spinning the whatever thing, spinning the wheel. Okay, there we go.